It's so weird. All right, so at this time, settle in. You can be comfortable for a Dhamma talk, but hopefully not too comfortable, because these are words offered just for your consideration. If something is useful, I invite you to ponder it, to consider it, and to take it for your own. You don't need to give me any credit. After all, I'm just a student learning, and the way has been pointed out for me. And if something is not useful, as we always say, please just leave it aside. Don't take anything just because I say, but consider it and put it to the test, and only then keep it and take it with you. Right, so begin with a homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Right. Tonight being the Uposatha night, the new moon night, and this being an occasion for the gathering of practitioners, of spiritual friends, of Buddhists across the world, as has been the case for 2,600 years. Like to always mark this occasion as the Buddha allowed, with the offering of a reflection. And 2 weeks ago, I gave a reflection on the Buddha. It was the Vesak, the holiday commemorating the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing away. And since then, there's been a fair number of questions and inquiries, people wanting to hear more about that, more about the refuges. What do we mean by Buddha? What do we mean by Dhamma? What do we mean by Sangha? But more importantly, and I think a sign of the times, people want to know about faith. They want to know what to have faith in. They want to know how to have faith. They want to know what faith is. And I think people are intuiting that something is lacking in our culture, in our modern approach to life, and to the questions of what are we doing. And so the matter of faith, I think people are zeroing in on, because it just seems like if you had more of it, you might be happier. And as it turns out, happiness is the general thrust of what the Buddha was teaching about. He did it by addressing our problems, but in understanding our problems and the problems of the human condition and of just life in general, we come to understand what are the obstacles to happiness. So faith is one of the faculties, one of the powers of our mind that allows us to get through obstacles and to get to this goal of happiness, which the Buddha said you can say universally about all beings. They're trying to be happy. They want to be happy. The only difference among us is how we are trying to do that. So when I talk about faith, it's very important to start out by pointing out there are two different ways to use this word. And there's one common way in the West to use the word faith. And that is to say, it is my faith, it is my belief. And it's important to point out that this is not what I'm talking about when I use the word faith. And indeed, though faith is a good enough word in the other way of using it, in this way of using it, what we are saying when we say it is my faith, we are saying that I am willing to believe this without being able to prove it. And this is something that is encouraged in many cultures. And I'll explain a bit about that. And the other way to use the word faith is to say, I have faith in. And this way of using the word faith is much closer to the Pali word saddha, which is what we are translating as faith. In this way, we're saying, I have confidence in this thing. And when we say, I have faith or confidence in something, that faith and confidence is usually backed by something. Rather than saying, I believe this without needing proof, we are saying, I believe this because it's been proven to me. Or simply, I believe this because it can be proven. I am willing to take this on because along the way, I can prove that this is something worthy of my confidence. So understanding the differences between these approaches to faith is to understand why some people are finding their approach to faith lacking and not fulfilling to them. There is a problem in the first approach to faith, and it's a subtle problem, and that's why most people never think to challenge it. The problem is that when we say, I am willing to believe in something without being able to prove it, if we look at that simply as a mind state, and this is what we do in the Buddhist path, we look at mind states simply for what they are, to understand their quality, to understand their function, how they work. There's nothing essentially us. There's nothing sacred that can't be investigated. And so this mind state of faith, where we're willing to believe in something that we can't prove, well, that's no different from any other mind state of believing something that can't be proven. The object doesn't matter. To explain that, if somebody were to say, I believe that well, it could be anything, and I don't want to challenge. Some people hold their beliefs very dear, but just say, I believe that these flowers are actually red because I believe my eyes are broken. And that's not something we could actually prove, because if we see it one way, we see it that way. But somebody else says, I believe, I remember somebody once had a stink bug in their home, and every time they turned around, the stink bug was somewhere else, almost like magic. It happened to be in the place of the thing that they were going for. When they were going for cereal, the stink bug was there on the cereal. And when they were going to the refrigerator, the stink bug was there on the refrigerator. And when they were going to the bookshelf, the stink bug was there. So somebody could say, I believe that the magic stink bug, Stinky, is in fact watching over me and protecting me from all harm. He knows what's best. These things can't be proven. There's nothing inherently wrong with a belief like that, except that it's no different than any other belief. I could say, I believe what's white to other people is actually red to me, or what's actually red to me is white to other people. I could say, I believe that there's a magical stink bug watching over all of us. I could say, I believe that democracy is the best form of government. I could say, I believe that fascism is the best form of government. And this belief, because it can't be proven realistically in any functional way. These things are just thrown out there, is to say, I'm willing to put my confidence in this, or I'm willing to believe this. Then that mind state is potentially dangerous. We say it's kind of a gamble. Say we say, I believe that you only live once. This is my viewpoint. Somebody else could say, I believe we never die, that we're immortal and we just continually cycle through lifetimes. Now, these are beliefs. And in terms of a single human lifetime, you can't actually prove either one of these. You'll be born, you'll live, and you'll die. And at that point of dying, you won't actually get an answer to whether or not you were right. When you take a belief in this way, it's a gamble because you can't prove it. So if you're right with this belief, then it works out for you. But if you're wrong, then it could be a disaster. And this is a gamble the Buddha points out. Say that you were to hold a belief that there are no consequences of bad actions. If you are right, no harm done. You get to the end of your life, there's no consequences for all the bad things you've done. But if you're wrong, that could be a very big mistake, to go around doing bad things, thinking that you'll get no consequences. And this is why the Buddha discourages us from cultivating this kind of faith. It might give us a sense of certainty or security for a time, but ultimately that sense of security is based on a gamble. It's based on shaky ground. There's one famous sutta or teaching where the Buddha he went to a town with a particular ethnic group called the Kalamas. And the Kalamas were at a sort of nexus of different philosophical teachers coming and going. And each one of them was saying something different. And this is the reality when we look out at the world today. Lots of people have lots of different beliefs that they say, this is true, that's false. And they say it even though it can't be proven. You've just got to have faith. And the Kalamas were hearing things like this. And when the Buddha passed by, they just shrugged and they say, we don't know what to do. This is really confusing. Everybody who comes here says they're right and everybody else is wrong. What do we do? And the Buddha, having great compassion, he said, Kalamas, yeah, you are confused about a confusing matter. And if you look out in the world, and this is what you see, this is what you hear by the teachers around you, and you're trying to base your decision-making process, so what to believe, on this shaky moral ground of this kind of blind faith, then you just throw darts or roll dice. It could be anything. Instead, the Buddha told the Kalamas, he gave them a very a famous teaching. He encouraged them to let go of blind faith. He said, don't go by oral tradition or teaching lineage. Don't go by hearsay, by book learning, by logic or inference. Don't go by working something out for yourself. Don't even believe in something because of the seeming competence of the speaker, or simply because you think they are my teacher and I should listen to them. Now, the Buddha was in fact a teacher. He was in fact competent. And yet, at the very moment, he was telling them, don't even believe me just because I sound like I know what I'm talking about. The Buddha was saying this blind faith, because it is a gamble, it should be abandoned. And if there were nothing else to cultivate, if there were no faith worthy of cultivating, then he wouldn't say abandon it. But because it is a false refuge, the Buddha said, abandon blind faith. Instead, what we can cultivate is actual faith, actual confidence. by abandoning these false justifications for believing something, what is left is that we believe in something that we can prove. And we decide that what we are going to believe in are only those things that can be proven, because they can be developed, they can be cultivated, they can be understood. That's a very important distinction. We can improve our understanding of these things. We can strengthen our confidence in them. So there's a hindrance to faith, and that is doubt. And doubt is very tricky because it sounds so smart. Suppose somebody came up to you and they said, how do you know the sun is going to arise tomorrow? How do you know? And you say, well, I it's always come up every other morning, the sun rises. Why wouldn't it tomorrow? And they'd say, that's not a justification. You don't know the sun is going to come up tomorrow just because it came up this morning. And it sounds very smart, doesn't it? And a lot of philosophy is like this. It sounds very smart. But this is actually how we know anything in the world. We don't know the future. We aren't certain about things 100%. But our mind is set up in such a way that we can work out things based on what we have seen in the past. And that gives us a sense of being able to predict what's going to happen in the future, a sense of stability and confidence in what's actually going on around us. The Buddha is saying that don't let doubt get in there and disrupt this natural capacity of our mind. He said, instead, strengthen it, cultivate it. Look at those things that you yourself have seen time and time again, and learn to put your faith in that. And so the Buddha told the Kalamas, when you have seen for yourself that something is for your harm and for the harm of others, and is criticized by wise people, encouraged by fools, then you should abandon that, because you've seen it for yourself. And don't be talked out of it. Don't let somebody tell you, no, it's okay to kill. No, it's okay to steal. You've seen the damage, so you can let it go. You don't actually need, a religious tradition to tell you that. You can see this for yourself. And if you investigate time and time again the consequences of an unskillful act, you will develop more and more confidence that that is in fact unskillful. That is something that just shouldn't be done. And when you yourself see that something is for your benefit over and over again, and for the benefit of others, that it is approved of by wise people and criticized by fools, well, then you should cultivate that. You should cultivate that, make it a basis for your lifestyle. That would be the smart thing to do, because you've seen it work in the past. And every time you see it work again in the future, your confidence, your resolve around that only gets stronger and stronger. And this is true faith. This is saddha. This is a power of the mind, which allows us to overcome all obstacles. It gives us the ability to strengthen our heart against the perils of life, the difficulties, the challenges, the pain of loss, and incessant change all around us. Everything's changing all the time, and we can't hold on to anything. That could be daunting. But when we have faith, we understand, we can anticipate what is to come. We don't need to hold on to the past. We can think of it, we can reference it, and we can draw conclusions about what's likely to happen in the future. We can strengthen our mind around those things which are reliable. when it comes to spiritual practice, and that is ultimately what I'm talking about, and ultimately what we tend to talk about on the Uposatha night, and when we give a Dhamma talk, we talk about spiritual practice. Practice is this idea that we can get better, that we are not a stable entity, that we're not just born with a certain amount of faith or a certain amount of energy or a certain amount of concentration and focus. We're not born with a certain amount of wisdom, and that's just who we are. The idea of spiritual practice is that we are born with the capability to change and to grow. And that if there's anything we're really going to do in life, why not do that? Whereas if we were to cultivate things in the world, maybe we cultivate having a nice car or a nice house. These things can be damaged by flood or fire or stolen by thieves. When we cultivate ourselves, our own faith, our own energy, our own wisdom, nothing can take that away from us. That stays with us. This is something we can see for ourselves and develop confidence in. And spiritual practice gives lasting results, results that we can take with us, results that can't be taken away. When it comes to spiritual practice, there are three great obstacles that can derail us. Three things that can throw us off, that we all must face. Things that will make spiritual practice difficult, or sometimes even almost impossible. These are the places where faith is most important. And these three things are pain, fear, and illness. When we're in pain, it's hard to settle, it's hard to concentrate, it's hard to think clearly. It's hard to let go when something is so near and dear to us that letting go of it creates immense pain. It's hard to let go. Pain is an obstacle to spiritual practice. Fear is that thing which stops us in our tracks. It prevents us from taking leaps or experimenting. Fear is imagining all of the worst things, never venturing out from our comfort zones until one day we find ourselves in that very situation we feared, because things just happen in life sometimes. And illness can incapacitate us. Ultimately, illness is something we all are moving towards. The infirmity of our body, the decay of our faculties, the collapse of our health and vigor. We're all moving towards illness. If we don't begin the spiritual practice now, we don't know that we'll have the opportunity in the future, because people do not age backwards. They age only in one direction and move in the direction of illness. And when illness comes, we may not have any more time for spiritual practice. So there are these three things that can obstruct us and hinder us. And there are false refuges, false protections from these things. Pain, we can try to shift things around. We can get the most comfortable house, the most comfortable cushions, eat the most delicious meals, most nourishing meals. We can try our best to avoid pain in all ways possible. Yet we will not ultimately succeed. We must pass away at some point. We must leave everything behind, and that won't be a pleasant experience. The false refuges of our life give way. What can we actually put our confidence in to get past suffering? When it comes to fear, what is fear but a response to the unknown? We don't know the future. It creates fear. We don't know if there are dangers out there. We don't know what it would be like to not eat dinner if we've eaten dinner every day of our lives. We don't know what it would be like. Would it be crazy with hunger pains? Would I be miserable? Would I lose my mind and go up and down the streets pulling out my hair? I don't know. Maybe I should eat something. It's fear, because we don't know until we know. The Buddha himself, when he was leaving the palace he grew up in to seek enlightenment, that very first night he slept in the woods, and he said he was terrified. Why was he terrified? Because he had never slept in the woods before, and things were crawling all around him and making noises. He was afraid because he didn't know. He simply he had no frame of reference. And illness, what do we do about that? I say that's more complicated, because it's something that might not strike us for a long time. And when it does strike us, we're often unprepared. It often comes without warning. Now, there are some illnesses which we get reminded of every moment of our lives. We grow up and our parents or grandparents have a heart condition, and yet we still go to McDonald's and get the cheeseburgers, and our cholesterol goes through the roof. We eat things with lots of salt, and then we're shocked when our doctor tells us we've got heart disease. It's silly, but that's kind of the way we work. There are some illnesses we should know are coming, but we don't plan for them. But then there are others that just come out of nowhere, a cold or this pandemic. And certainly people knew a pandemic was going to happen sooner or later. They didn't know when. They didn't know how. They didn't know what it would be. If they had, they would have prepared, but they didn't. What are our refuges from these? How do we protect ourselves from the unknown? How do we protect ourselves from when we lose our faculties, when our body declines? What are the refuges people go to, the medicines they buy, the insurance plans they pay for day after day? As though, life insurance is interestingly named, because when you no longer have life, well, what good was the insurance? So what are called refuges in the Buddha's teaching are those things which are reliable, those things which, if we put our confidence in, that confidence can be confirmed, and it can grow, and it can become a power in our lives that helps us cut through these obstacles, these barriers, these hindrances to spiritual practice. The Buddha is the first refuge, said to help us overcome all pain, all dukkha, all suffering. And how could this be? And people are saying, well, how do I do this? How do I recollect the Buddha? And I'd say it's not necessarily a formula you can follow and you just arrive, at the ability to overcome pain in your life. If it were, we would just teach that in school. We'd be like, okay, follow this, do step 1, step 2, step 3. But no, actually, this requires some empathy. This requires some qualities of heart. But by putting in this effort, we get rewarded with a stronger, more vital heart through it. So thinking about the Buddha, I often encourage people first to think of a teacher in their lives who greatly affected them. A teacher who inspired you, who encouraged you in your growth, who gave you the resources that you needed, who was there for you, who listened, who actually wanted you to succeed. Almost everybody has had somebody like that. And then I'd say, as you're thinking about this, you can think the Buddha had that quality that you see in this person, in a teacher. The Buddha is not simply a man. Men, are born and they live and they die. But the Buddha represents for us that quality of enlightenment, that quality of an awakened heart. The Buddha was one who was sugato. He was accomplished. He was attained to wholesome states. He had put in the effort to cultivate them because he had intuited long ago that that was something he could do. He could build them up like a reservoir. He could draw from them in his search for enlightenment. And not just the qualities of a good teacher, but the qualities of a good parent, qualities of a good mentor, qualities of a good friend. Though the Buddha was a great teacher, a great spiritual teacher, he said that this is how you can think of him, as your good friend, your spiritual friend. Because should you yourself attain enlightenment, you would be equal to the Buddha in that regard. So the Buddha is a representation that in this human form, we can be enlightened. And when we think about this, and when we think about wholesome qualities, it's not about putting our confidence in a single man, who lived 2,600 years ago in ancient India, but it's putting qualities in that capacity in each of us to have wholesome mind states, to have a strong heart, to be good. And I ask you, when you think about that, when you take heart in that, don't you feel stronger? Don't you feel like you could do a bit more? Don't you feel like you could bear a bit more in terms of pain or adversity? If you honestly knew that there was somebody there who had your back, that there was somebody who wanted you to succeed, if you honestly knew that there was somebody who had done it and done what you were trying to do before and had succeeded, wouldn't you be able to just try that much harder and be able to go that much further with that bit of confidence instilled in you? So we can have faith in the Buddha. The Buddha is a true refuge because, as I said, this is something you can prove for yourself. You don't have to believe that the Buddha had all good states, that the Buddha was fully enlightened. You don't have to just take it just because I say it, or just because people have been saying it for thousands of years. But this is something you can prove for yourself. If you do cultivate your heart, if you do attain enlightenment, then at that moment, you will know what it was the Buddha has experienced. And you will have absolutely no doubt. This is something you can get better at. This is something you can prove to yourself. Each time you abandon an unwholesome quality, you feel an urge to be violent or to be rude or to be selfish. And you restrain that. And you see that a crisis is averted. You can know, oh, yeah, no, that works. And then the next time when you're presented with that opportunity, you can again not do it. And you see you still don't experience the suffering that comes from consequences. You're like, oh, it still works. And that's true faith. It's because it's truly reliable. In terms of fear, the Dhamma is our refuge from fear. And Dhamma doesn't just mean the Buddha's teachings. Dhamma means truth. So what is true? There are things which are true in relative terms, things which are true sometimes. The value of $1, your name, the place where you live. You can say what these are right here and now, but tomorrow those might be different. You might get a new nickname. Economies might change. You might move. What is true now, but then not true tomorrow. This is not the kind of true that we're talking about when we say Dhamma. But when we say that all beings who've been born have died, well, have you ever met somebody who's been alive forever? I mean, we could search, for somebody who was, never going to die. But that would be an odd sort of search. And we can just look around us and we see that people are born and then they die. This is something that is quite obviously applying to all beings. Whether it takes them, 3 days like a mayfly to live out their lives, or millions and billions of years like a Brahma god up in one of the high heavens in Buddhist cosmology, still the same process occurs. Nothing is forever. That is a Dhamma. That is something which is true universally. It is true now. It will be true tomorrow. It was true yesterday. You can develop confidence in something like that. Imagine the confidence in something like this. And say you're up on a mountain and you need to climb down, but climbing up, I don't know if you've ever climbed a mountain, but climbing up is a lot easier than climbing down, because when you're climbing up, you're looking up, and gravity doesn't seem like such a problem, and you just have your goal in mind. But when you look down, gravity is really a problem, and it can be quite intimidating. But imagine you're staring down the side of a mountain, looking at all the boulders down below you, and knowing at any second you could slip and fall to those very boulders, and saying, well, all beings die. One day I will die. Someday I must die. Well, it's true, isn't it? It's reliable. And how does it feel when faced with an unknown to instead dwell on a known? And some people would say that doesn't, that's not very helpful. But think about it. Try it out for yourself. When you're faced with an unknown, will I be able to pay off my taxes this year? Substitute a known. Well, I'm gonna give the IRS as much money as I can. As much money is in my pocket. If they arrest me, they arrest me. If it's not enough, it's not enough. Substitute a known for an unknown. And this is what it is to cultivate a refuge in the Dhamma, cultivate a refuge in those things which are always true. You can only do what you can do. But more essentially, all things are impermanent. You're going to face pain sometimes in your life. There is nothing, not your body, not your memories, not your habits, not even your waking consciousness, which is essentially you and is immune to change. These are universal. And as the Buddha said to the Kalamas, if nothing else, you can just dwell on this. A wholesome act has a pleasant result. You can see this for yourself time and time again. An unwholesome act has an unpleasant result. And you can see this for yourself time and time again. And we cultivate nothing else except that. Make it a power in your mind, a confidence. You're certain that this is the way the world works because you've always seen it work. And just see how that changes your life. And in terms of illness, we go to refuge to the Sangha, and Sangha means community. And this is maybe a more hypothetical sort of refuge for some people. but imagine the extent of what you can do for yourself when you're sick, when you're really ill. You have no energy, you're lying about. How then will you take care of yourself? You can't. How will you be taken care of? Well, if it's going to happen, it will be somebody else will take care of you. Is that not true? And it's how we are born into this world. No human being is born capable of feeding themselves, clothing themselves. No human being is born knowing language. No human being is born knowing a trade so that they can immediately go to work and earn a living. We're all born dependent on others. And though we at some point grow into maturity and can do these things for ourselves, when illness comes, that ability is taken away from us. And what's left is the way that we support each other. When I'm healthy, I can take care of somebody who's ill. And when I'm ill, maybe somebody else will take care of me. This is the idea of community in mundane terms. If we look out for each other, then we don't really need to have much fear of illness or aging. Just as we give our time to take care of those around us who have become infirm, we can suspect that we'll be taken care of in our time when we're ill and old. But in the greater terms of spiritual practice, when we cultivate association with people who are wise, people who are energetic, people who are focused, people who have faith, when we draw close to those people, in those times when we face a spiritual illness or infirmity in our own faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, we can rely on those people, on our spiritual friends, to help remind us of what direction to look, of what's a true refuge, of what's reliable. And this is community in the sense of Sangha, a spiritual community, a spiritual friendship. This is a refuge that we can rely on, that the more that we cultivate association with good people, the more we are surrounded by good qualities. And the more we're surrounded by good qualities, the more we see the Buddha. The more we see the Buddha, the more we know what is true in the world. It all kind of supports each other. This is something you're developing confidence in one by just looking at these qualities. You're developing confidence in the other two at the same time. That there are things that we can rely on. There are things that we can know. There are things that will support us on this journey reliably, time and time again. And so this is what we mean by refuge, and this is what we mean by faith. And so people have been asking me about faith and what does it mean what should we take heart in? And this would be my answer to that question. I hope some of this might be useful or encouraging. Many of us have already taken steps in this direction. I've yet to find a person who is a complete 100% fool, who doesn't have any good qualities or isn't moving in at least one good direction. So all of us have gotten a piece of what it means to put our faith in confidence in the right things, and to let go of blind beliefs that seem to give us security until they don't. And once we've made this a power in our lives, the most daunting challenges won't even slow us down. And so I encourage you to give this some thought. And these are tools. Faith is not something we're born with a certain amount of. This is something we can develop. We just need a little encouragement, need some pointing in the right direction, and then the rest is up to us. And so with that, I would like to offer these thoughts for your consideration tonight.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
All right.